right, you guys, welcome to Open Studio Night. Clifton, say hi. We are featuring Clifton Crawford here for our Open Studio Night of May. As you guys know, we are Seneca Studios. We bring you guys this programming every month on the second Friday of every month. Today we're super lucky and excited to be featuring Clifton, who is working on a public art commission with the city of Fort Worth. So stay tuned, hang out. If you're local, come by and say hello. We've got the bleachers set out outside. It's a really beautiful day out, and it's going to be a lovely evening as well. This broadcast happens from about 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. So since we just started, we will be broadcasting for a few more hours until about 9. Because this is a live broadcast, you can hang out on our chat, let us know if you have any questions. But the best way to engage with us is to come by in person, hang out with us on the bleachers. That way you can talk directly to Clifton and ask him questions about what he's making. So my name is Jean. I'm going to be talking with you all for a brief little bit, and then I'm going to pass off the mic to Kevin, and then we'll chat again in a little bit after that. So at this point, we are in our hot shop, which is the hottest studio in the building. Clifton's got a gather of glass on that blowpipe that he's working with. And we just saw him add a little bit of color onto the glass. So we're gonna let him work for a little bit. I'm gonna talk with you guys about the process, and then we'll have a chance in a little bit to chat with Clifton in the gallery. So I should warn you, because this happens every summer, our equipment does tend to overheat as we get closer to the middle of the summer. So just bear with us. We do have multiple cameras on in the studio, so if my feed cuts out, then we should be able to still give you a little view of what's going on in the studio. So Clifton tonight is assisted by Blake Bowles. Say hi, Blake. We got Nolan over here on the camera and also assisting. And then Kevin McGeehee. Hi, Kevin.
Kevin.
So Kevin's gonna help me narrate in a little bit. We've got a few people hanging out on the bleachers also. So again, if you're local, come hang out with us in person. It's a good opportunity to check this out live if you've never done so before. So Clifton is using a little bit of newspaper as well as a blow hose to inflate the bubble and shape the bubble. Newspaper is one of the best tools in this studio because you can put your hands super close to the glass. So we use a little bit of folded up newspaper. We wet it, and then when we're shaping it against the glass rides on a layer of steam. So Clifton has got to manage, as he's working, he's got to reheat, blow, and shape, kind of simultaneously and different, depending on what he wants. So as we go through the demonstration tonight, if this is your first time watching, use the chat function, ask us some questions. Tell us what your favorite part about glass is, if you're coming back and hanging out with us and this isn't your first time. Also, don't forget to share this stream. We're going to be broadcasting for a couple of hours. Sorry, 2.45, so 2 hours and 45 more minutes. So definitely share this feed. If there's someone you know who likes glassmaking or is interested in glassmaking, they might want to hang out with us and watch for a little bit. Okay. So the plan right now, Clifton's got a bubble on the end there. Blake right here is pulling out a mold from our pickup kiln. He's setting it here in the sand. And then Clifton's gonna come over and blow some hot glass into that.
Like just spot me, make sure that the neck doesn't get too close or too far. Okay. Should, because he'll break it all off on the
So that mold there is basically something like a ceramic shell of sorts. Clifton's going to bring his bubble over. He's checking the size, and then he's going to blow right into that. So the heat's got to be just right when Clifton does this. And the size has got to be right as well. He's kind of pushing in there and blowing into the pipe at the same time.
Fill it to the lip? Yes.
Beautiful, beautifully done. Now that mold, I don't know if you could tell from our video angles, but that mold is a mold that was made on a hand, on a closed fist. So I'll take you over in a second and show you some of these things that Clifton's been working on. But this process is basically called a blow mold. So a mold was made over a wax form, and then the wax was removed, and now the glass is basically taking the place of the wax. All right. So the nice thing about this material that Clifton is using is he can heat it up, and when he's ready, when he feels confident that the glass has taken on the form, he can basically crack it off after that. So at this point, he's going to put in a jack line. The jack line is going to allow the glass to separate from the steel pipe that he has there. It's basically a thin little constriction, almost like a score line. Like if you were to cut into a piece of paper with an X-Acto blade, it's kind of like that. That's what a jack line is. So once the temperature is right, Clifton can go in and he can remove that shell. At this point, it's very fragile and delicate, but the glass has taken on all of the detail from the inside of the mold. So Clifton has got to be delicate with this process because he can't let the glass get too cold or the glass is going to crack. And he doesn't want the glass to heat up so much that it loses its shape and starts wiggling around too much on him. Just a little encouragement, and you can see that it's picked up all the detail from the inside of that mold. Clifton is going to brush off all the leftover material. And then go back in so that the glass doesn't get too cold. So this piece of equipment is called a reheating chamber, the one that Clifton's using to reheat the glass. Every so often he's got to reheat the glass so that it doesn't get too cold. Glass that gets too cold tends to crack. We can't have that before we're ready for it. What color was that, Clifton?
It's black.
It is black?
It's a piece of rod, and then I put it on the surface. I'm really excited about how the color right on the surface is really showing up the detail.
Yeah. So the color that Clifton's using, you heard him mention it is a rod of color. Color comes in different grades. We buy it in different styles of glass, different types. So the type that Clifton has used is basically a big old bar of color. But you can use it as crushed up color, powdered color, all sorts of stuff. All right. So this is something you won't really get a chance to do if you're not here. So if you're local, don't forget you can come out and hang out with us on the bleachers. And you have an opportunity to ask Clifton tons of questions if you want, about his process, about what he's making, about his public art piece. And maybe if you're lucky, he'll tell you a good dad joke or two. So Clifton's using a little bit of gold foil, it looks like, on this piece.
The release doesn't want it to stick. I gotta brush that release off. I was wondering about that.
Do you think it is because it's
Got a little graphite.
got it?
So the release doesn't want it to stick. That's what the other one is.
Got it, got it. So Clifton's trying to see if the gold leaf will stick, but in order for the glass to separate from that mold that we had,
I was wondering how
the inside of the mold has to be coated with a thin layer of graphite. And so that means that there's a thin layer of graphite on the outside of the glass right now, and that's going to prevent anything from really wanting to stick to the glass. So the plan from here is to make sure the temperature is correct. Blake is going to get prepared to put this away for a later piece. So Clifton is double checking the heat, making sure the heat is correct for knocking it off. Blake is grabbing some protective gear in order to be able to grab the glass and then put it into the annealer for it to kind of hang out. Since they are picking this piece back up, I believe this is going in the color box.
Yes.
Okay.
Kind of as a backup. There is another one we plan to pick up, but
Got it. So generally a color box is used when we're gonna pick the piece back up. So Clifton's planning on using this piece as a backup if he needs it. You can see Blake there with the tongs. Clifton's putting a little bit of water on that constriction.
Gonna fire polish that.
And with a little tap, the piece comes free from the pipe. So since the plan is to pick up that piece later, Blake is putting it into our color box. If you've hung out with us on our Open Studio Night demonstrations or any of our online demonstrations, you know that those boxes back behind Nolan are called the annealers. And once we're done with a piece, once Clifton's done with a piece, we're gonna be popping them into these guys. All right, you guys. So Clifton's gonna get started with the actual first piece, where he's gonna be picking up a set of those hands. I am gonna pass the mic on to Kevin, who's gonna take over here for a little bit. And then I will see you guys shortly.
Nothing under there?
We'll probably won't need it anymore. But
Thanks, Kevin.
You bet.
pick up that black. What's up? Pick up that
Alrighty, hopefully you guys can hear me. We are gathering up a little bit of glass out of our furnace at 2100 degrees Fahrenheit. Cliff's gonna cool the pipe. Nope, he's not gonna cool the pipe because he has no feeling in his hands. After 24 years of doing this, all the nerve endings are completely burnt off. So he has no sensation left in his hands. What he's doing is creating a little bit of a collar. It's gonna work like a little bit of a gasket or a glue joint between the steel and the chunk of rod that he's about to stick onto it. So he's blown forcefully, pushed a little bit of air pressure out to it, and then he's taking those straight trim shears and quickly cutting off that big kind of slug of glass. Don't need it all, but we do need a little thin rail to it. Because that's all clear glass, once Blake that has all of that in the tweezers, he can grab that and go take it to our recycle bucket. I have no smooth transition in my motion, so I hope I don't make you guys seasick. No, you're doing great, Cliff. A little bit of cooling and shaping just to make sure it's got a nice even contact point. And he's going to back up. We're going to take it over whee, to our pickup oven, sitting at 950 degrees Fahrenheit. Stab the color reasonably close to the center of the collar. That attaches. And then we'll get that really nice and toasty. Get that shaped up in kind of a conical form. And then add a little bit of air pressure to create an internal bubble. So the glory hole or reheating oven is running about 2300 degrees Fahrenheit. That gives us the opportunity to continually add heat to the glass so we can work it. If we don't have the glory hole, our working time with this material is about 20 to 25 real seconds of actual interaction. All of our equipment in here, with the exception of the cooling ovens, is natural gas and forced air. The glory hole or reheating oven takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours to get up to a good working temperature. So when we're not here, not doing anything, these guys are shut off. The only piece of equipment that runs 24/7 would be our furnace that holds all of our molten clear glass. And we'll get back to that once Cliff has this shaped up and start adding more material on top of it. Yep. On. Yeah. So this will be a nice long heat. Get that color shaped up appropriately. Cliff is using a big chunk of black. Black in the hot shop is one of our softest colors, so it'll take a minimal amount of time to actually get hot enough to where he can manipulate it and get the bubble set. But you do want to make sure that the heat is equal throughout the entire bar. Otherwise, when you try to add that bubble, it may blow out a little bit irregular. Might look like a mushroom kind of pushing off the head of the pipe. We want it to be a nice even sphere as it breaches the head of that pipe when Cliff likes his shape. You'll also notice he's constantly rotating the pipe. If he stops turning, gravity is going to affect it generally in a direction we don't want it to go, which is straight down. He is holding it up every once in a while to allow it to sag back, create a little bit more thickness. It's hot in there. Can't even see what's going on, it's so hot. We're doing any other color application, Cliff?
I don't think so. I think I'll just let this be very glossy at the end it's red.
Okay, cool. So this is going to be a body of a vase.
Yeah, the body is, and then I'm going to punny up and I'm going to stick the end in the opening of it.
Oh, very cool.
So remind me to put a hole in the bottom.
Okay, interesting. So this is going to be the vessel. The vessel is going to be black, and then there is a red hand that is already in our pickup oven, sitting at 1,000 degrees, that will eventually get plunged into this whole form. So this steel table Cliff is using, it's called a Marver, M-A-R-V-E-R, historically made of stone in some form or fashion, but allows us to cool the exterior of the pipe, so when we add air pressure, it blows out in a nice uniform fashion, generally to where we want it to go. Tiny little puff of air added into it, and then you can see it expanding right there. Once we get that expansion pushed down through, we'll release the pressure so it no longer grows. And then back for cooling and shaping. And if Cliff likes the form that he has, likes the depth that the bubbles traveled, probably going to be a little bit of hurry up and wait so we can allow the glass to, oh no, we've hit an emergency on our temperature on our phone. Moment, please. Overheated.
We can still hear you. All right, well, you guys just hang out while we solve some technical difficulties. I'm gonna just continue to talk with you guys. So at this point, we're just kind of hanging out and waiting. Now, the glass has got to be chilly, a little bit chilly before we go into the furnace. And chilly is relative, right? So Clifton's kind of letting Blake hang out while he chats with the team about what his next steps are. But we can't take hot glass and go back into our furnace. That color, if it's too hot, is going to kind of melt into our clear glass supply. And so we've got to keep it kind of cool so that when we do dip into our furnace, we're not dripping color back in. So Blake's doing a great job as an assistant. He's monitoring to make sure that the glass doesn't get too cold, right? Earlier we talked about the glass getting too cold and cracking, but he's kind of monitoring it, making sure it doesn't get too cold, but definitely not letting it get too hot or gooey. So Clifton's going to take that color and he's going to create a layer of clear over it. You can see that when the glass comes out of the furnace, it's pretty bright orange. And when we went in, it was like kind of dark in color, right? So heat really affects color massively. So Clifton is using a wooden block to kind of shape the glass up. And we keep these blocks saturated in water so that they don't burn up too fast. These wooden blocks are made of a fruit wood. And so the fruit wood is like kind of a little bit more dense than other types of wood. And so they tend to not burn up very quickly, but we've also got to make sure they stay saturated in water so that they don't burn up too fast. So you can see that Clifton's going for like kind of a nice Q-tip shape. And then he's blowing into the end of the pipe to inflate the bubbles slightly. At this point, it's kind of a delicate balance of heating, blowing, shaping. Clifton's got to make sure that the bubble doesn't get too thin. So he's shaping as he is blowing. So Clifton's plan is to gather one more layer of clear over this, which is going to allow him to blow it a little bit bigger. So he's been kind of talking about this being a smaller piece. He doesn't want to put too much strain on himself or the team. And then they will be making a larger piece later this evening. So communication, as you can see, is super important in our studio, right? Any hot shop team, they need to tell each other what's going on, right? We're working with the really hot material. So you can see that Clifton is telling Blake exactly what he's planning on doing because Blake is his primary assistant tonight. So if Blake doesn't know what's going on, it could be a dangerous thing, right? Blake's got to know where to go, what to do, what Clifton's kind of thinking. And so we are all pretty close in this studio, but we're definitely not mind readers. So communication is super important for anything we do in the studio. So once Clifton's got the right temperature, he's going to go back into the furnace. I know Kevin already kind of talked to you guys about the furnace, but we keep the furnace hot pretty much all the time until the middle of the summer. And that furnace sits at about 2100 degrees, pretty much year round. So our clear glass we get from a place called Spruce Pine, which is a beautiful clear glass to work with. And all of the color that we use is manufactured off-site. So we buy it from various companies. So some of you who are watching out there might be kind of interested in doing this yourself. Don't forget that Seneca is primarily an educational facility and we have tons of classes online. So if you think that you may be interested in trying this out, go check out our website. We've got tons of classes. You'll see a classes tab at the top of the website at senecastudios.org. And then when you click on that, you'll see classes for our hot shop, for our flame working studio, for our kiln forming studio, and for our cold shop. And if you've never been here before and you're not sure where to start, we always recommend the walk-up workshops as a great way to start and try something out before you get too involved. but I will warn you that glass is kind of addicting, so you've been warned, okay? It is tons of fun. So at this point, Clifton is heating up the glass. He's planning on shaping it further, just like him and Blake talked about. And so he's got to get some heat into it to be able to manipulate the glass. Cold glass does crack, but it also doesn't move. And so we've got to get some heat worked back into the glass in order to inflate it, shape it, do anything with it while it's hot. So Clifton's using the Marver Table, which is basically a stainless steel table that we can use to shape the glass. But you guys know that steel is kind of cold, right? So as he's shaping up the glass, it's also cooling the glass down very dramatically. And so right after this, Clifton's gonna need to go back into that reheating chamber to heat everything back up. So you'll see him inflating by blowing into the end of that pipe. And wherever the glass is cold or cooler, it's not going to blow out as far. And so just by chilling it out on that Marver, he's able to kind of control the shaping a little bit.
Alrighty, so we're back. Maybe. Cliff's got a couple of gathers on here using some wet newspaper to cool and shape the glass while he's adding air pressure from a blow hose that's attached to the end of the pipe. The pressure he's putting in is relatively minor in the grand scheme of things. It's almost like you're just blowing a whistle, not trying to make a lot of noise, just enough to keep the pressure so the glass constantly inflates. What's furthest away from him, what's at the tip of that pipe, is always going to be the bottom of the piece, especially blowing a vessel form. That wet newspaper is multiple layers of paper folded over itself, and we're about to get a fluffy torch to add some heat. So by using that fluffy torch, just propane, we can get a really nice concentrated heat directly at the connection point at the end of the pipe to the beginning of the vessel. We want to add that really concentrated heat so as it comes back to the bench, we can create what's called a neckline or a jack line. This line is going to be critical in removing the piece nice and evenly and symmetrically. So you add that extra heat there specifically because when you're reheating, everything's getting hot at exactly the same time. So by adding that little bit of extra heat with the fluffy torch, you can concentrate it more on that neckline. So the pair of tools Cliff has in his hands called jacks. He's going to slowly add a little bit of pressure directly on the glass. You can stretch it away from himself to make it a little bit longer. And you can start to see a little bit of a valley kind of working its way towards the end of that pipe. That valley is going to eventually have a nice accentuated line. Should be really nice and symmetrical and even. So ultimately when we are done with the blowing part, we can break it off nice and predictably. The smoke that you're seeing coming off those jacks is just beeswax melting down. We wax the blades of the jacks so the glass and the steel slides smoothly together so you don't end up with some really, really nice loud screechy sounds. We'll do this in a couple of tries. The more even the neckline is, the more even it will break off the piece. And then back to the heat. If Cliff likes the neckline that he's got on there, he'll back out and start heating that bottom 2/3 of the piece. What this means now, that top third from the neckline we created to the broadest part of the vessel, which we will call the shoulder, is pretty much done at this point. It's now going to be influencing the shape of the piece from the shoulder to the bottom. As it comes out, you'll really start to see how the heat has been isolated. Again, the section that's closest to us out of the hole right now is going to be fairly dark. What is in the hole right now getting really nice and hot. As it comes out, it's going to be really, really bright orange. So you can really see how that heat has been isolated to that bottom section. And hang it down. So one of our best tools in here is gravity. Gravity gives that opportunity to stretch the piece, start giving a little bit of height. So Blake has jumped on and grabbed a paddle. It's a wooden tool made out of cherry wood, burns nice and slow, has a tight grain structure, has a little bit of natural sugar in there. That helps slow down the burning process as well. What's being created will be the bottom of the piece. So while that bottom is going in, Cliff has been actively adding a little bit of air as well. So switch over to another camera. We're going to take this one inside, let it get cool.
See, you distracted me. That's your fault.
So we've got it blown out. We got a nice crisp base to it. Going back to that fluffy torch to add heat where we want it at that neckline so it doesn't get too cold. So we're getting some measurements, using some calipers at preset diameters. Blake's going to take over doing a little bit of heating. Need a door, or are you good? So at this point, we're actually going to drill a little bit of a hole using tungsten. We preheat the tungsten with the super hot oxygen propane fire. So that way when we're ready to actually pierce a hole through it, it's going to move through much, much easier. So keep that probe nice and hot, twist it in there, and that'll just slowly wiggle its way through. Might have to do it a couple of times depending on the thickness that you've got. twisting back and forth, keeping that really nice and toasty. There we go. Pierced right through the bottom. Basically, the reason why we do that is it's going to allow for air to move in and out of the piece. Eventually, this top section is going to end up being closed up, so you won't have an opportunity for air to move through it. If you don't provide that little air exchange area with that little hole, by the time you seal up the piece, if you're reheating and cooling, it's going to expand and contract and could actually fully collapse on itself. So going back to that oxygen propane torch, just adding a little bit of extra heat to fire polish that bottom section out. So at this point, Blake is gathering a small amount of glass on the end of a solid rod. This little bit of glass is going to eventually find itself attached to the bottom of the vessel. This is called a punty. The punty is a bridge from one pipe to another. It will allow us to remove the piece from the blowpipe so we can address and open up the top section. And we're just doing what would be considered a relatively straightforward dome punty, where the tip of the glass off the end of that is just going to end up being a nice even dome. Just a nice subtle rounded section to it. When Blake's like that, likes the shape, we'll bring it over to Cliff. We'll get an okay. Cliff's going to take a little bit of a flash, just a maintenance heat, to keep everything nice and warm. Blake will drop in, give a little bit of heat to that punty so it stays nice and malleable. And he's going to take that, present it to Cliff. Cliff's going to grab it, take those tweezers, add a little bit of air. That helps cool the surface a little bit if it's overheated. And then to the best of our human ability, he's going to stick that to the bottom, add a little bit of pressure so we create a nice, even attachment. Rolling back and forth to keep it as centered as possible. Pressing down with the tweezers to help keep everything even as well. Grabbing a little bit of water with those tweezers, putting that on the neckline. That creates a thermal stress. So when we like the temperature and stability, little vibration, we'll break that free. And then at this point, we'll start working the top third. So you can see we've got a fair, well, can't really see too much heat coming out and cooking the lens of the camera, but the lip of the vessel is still pretty chunky. It's fairly sharp. We want to get that really nice and heated up so it's nice and smooth. Oh, look at that fashion forward eyewear that Clifton's wearing now. Doubling up on the eye protection. So now you can see where the air pressure has been going in the whole time. Going on the interior with those jacks, lifting slightly, creates a slightly wider opening. And then we'll come in with that oxygen propane torch once again. And we'll switch phones yet again.
I'll grab you another one.
Okay. So we're adding some pretty specific heat with that hot torch. Looks like we're going to put maybe a couple little wraps on top of it. What's our plan with the hot torch?
I'm giving myself a reason to put that there.
Okay. So using the hot torch to add really specific heat, then coming in with those tweezers, adding a couple little dots. Those dots are just a location for Clifton to use so he can aim where this bit's actually going to go. And then he's using the map gas to keep the punty nice and warm. Going to do a little bit of a pass just to cool that surface on this bit. Going to bring it over, dump it straight up and down. Cliff will grab that, find those little dots that he made, and then just string that right over it. Kind of plunging in and out, creating a big old massive gooey blob of fun. What are you going to do with that big old blobby goo?
Switch it around a little bit and put some gold on it.
Ah,
And we cover it up again after we put gold on it. Right.
so this little blob is going to be manipulated a few times, pulled into a little bit more of a specific pattern, using the tag, basically a glorified butter knife, to cool and shape that glass around. Eventually, it's going to end up with a little bit of gold leaf layered on top of it, and then that will be sealed with another bit of hot glass to make sure the gold's encased. So periodically you may see us take just what we would consider a flash or maintenance heat. It keeps the entire piece nice and warm, so as we're working we don't have to worry about one side getting colder than another section. So Blake's pausing that rotation so the blob will be kind of sinking downwards when Cliff's ready to apply the gold. He'll flip that over, and then we'll just kind of layer that right onto it. The official gold dabbing rag. The flashes, once you've added a precious metal to it, become really, really short. Gold is a very, very soft metal. If you heat it for too long, it'll just completely evaporate off the surface. So any heating that Blake is doing at this point is going to be very, very quick and fast. Add a little bit of air pressure, and this is 23 karat gold. The little dabs with the towel make sure that that gold is fully adhered to the glass. And I think we're going to do one more application of the gold. Let's make sure we've got a nice coating of it. So it looks like we've got all the gold that we need. Blake's doing a little flash, bringing that back to Cliff. Going to take that horsehair brush, thanks to Crow Print Tools for the awesome brush. Super fantastic, super slow burning. I know it's, I have no idea what the secret material that he uses, but it is fantastic stuff. Can't say thank you enough for an awesome tool. So while Cliff is going to maintain some nice warmth on this, Blake's going to get a couple of small gathers and basically repeat what they did beforehand. And if you're just joining us, the furnace where Blake is pulling all this clear glass out, basically you've got a gigantic puddle of molten material in there at temperatures running 2100 degrees Fahrenheit, and holds at capacity 385 pounds of molten clear glass. Generally twice a week we'll add a little bit of extra material to it, do a Wednesday night charge or adding of glass to the furnace. Helps us get from first part to the last half of the week. And then on Sunday afternoons, we'll spend anywhere from 4 to 6 hours just throwing in new raw material, allowing it to cook over about an 18-hour period of time. So come Monday morning, we've got really nice, clean, clear glass. So Blake's got the bit kind of squatted up. Dump that straight up and down. And then Cliff's just going to slowly massage that all over that surface, making sure he covers up as much of the gold that he applied, so we don't have to worry about any of it coming off as we go through the process. And take those tweezers, add a little bit of detail to it. Or the shears come in and cut. Is there a bubble?
There's a little smudge.
So there's a little bit of unwanted texture in the glass. So Cliff, that's why he was using those tweezers. He just trimmed everything out really nice and quick, and then took the straight shears and cut it free so he wouldn't end up with the texture in the surface. Our furnace has basically been running on and off for the last 5 years. We only shut down in from July through the end of August. And after 5 years, the glass has really done a number on the vessel that holds it all in there. Glass in a molten state is really, really caustic. It's trying to eat through whatever is in its path. So over 5 years, our nice bowl that we started with, our crucible, has slowly gotten more and more pitted. At this point, this summer, after we do our ice cream social, we will start taking our furnace down all the way to the ground, and then eventually we will rebuild it. We've got a new bowl ordered. We've got all the castable that basically holds everything together. Think of it like a high temperature concrete. About 3,000 pounds of it is what goes into holding the entire furnace together. So now Cliff will do some sculpting. He's going to take that hot torch, really build in some nice heat in that clear glass. And then he'll start using the tweezers and the trim shears. I kind of pull and stretch and manipulate the glass where he wants it to go. Give it a little bit more precise movement. So got a nice soaking heat with that oxy torch. Blake's going to come out. Cliff's going to go for one more round with that oxygen torch. Really soak the heat into it. He was letting Blake know that he's going to potentially take some of the glass and manipulate it a little bit further over the lip, or at least around the lip, I believe is the plan. It sounds like I said, he's going to grab some of those larger kind of bumps of glass, pull them with the shears and the tweezers, and just kind of relocate them. It'll thin out the material a little bit, also make it a little bit more refined. Probably have to use a reasonable amount of force to make this move where he wants it to go as well. So Blake's got to be prepared to feel a pretty decent amount of resistance as he's going through the process. We're going to start underneath this guy, kind of grabbing and pulling and stretching. You can kind of see Cliff pulling that out towards what would be the lip of the piece, and he's going to come back over that top section. And at this point, he's working outside the bench. It gives him a heck of a lot better leverage, better view, so he can really move the material where he wants it to go. And Cliff and Blake are going to be in constant communication too to make sure that the punty stays warm. You know, Cliff can't spend a whole lot of time cutting, tweezing, trimming, and moving the material. He's got about a 20-second working window before Blake has to take it back and add some heat to it. So Cliff's now back in the bench. He's grabbed his tagliol, again that glorified butter knife, adding a little bit of pressure to move the material around. So again, pretty nice amount of material towards the lip of the piece that is going to be a little bit more focused with the reheating heat. Then brought back to Cliff, probably going to take the tool and just slowly slug that off the end, thin it out again, make it a little bit more refined and defined. You'll notice Cliff also actually has a glove on. It's a double knit Kevlar glove. So that allows them to be close to the material without experiencing a lot of direct heat. Without that, things do get a little bit on the toasty side. You could wear leather gloves, certainly. The Kevlar breathes a little bit better though. And also if the glove were to get wet, it's easier to remove. Because if you do have a glove that does get wet with all this heat, you can get some pretty serious steam burns quite quickly. So you'll notice Blake's grabbed that map gas, now adding a little bit of heat on the punty just to make sure it stays warm. You can also see as Cliff is turning this, that back section's gotten pulled pretty far off center just because of the amount of torque that he's using to strip the glass off of the lip. Okay, so we're going to take that blob that's off the end of the lip, stretch that out a little bit further, pull it back out of the way. Eventually that will get back into the piece and kind of grab and attach to the hand that's eventually going to get stuffed into this vessel. Then grab it with those diamond shears, kind of stretch it and thin it out. Cut off the excess that he may not like. So now we've kind of got that little tail kind of folded off the back. Eventually that will come back and actually touch the hands. They're going to get stuffed in there. And if you weren't here earlier when I'm referring to hands, Cliff actually has a blown set of hands that are sitting in a pickup oven at 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That when we've got the diameter right and the shape right on this form, will actually be picked up and then stuffed into the opening. Whose hands are we using on this one?
This one's mine.
So the hand that we're going to, is it just a singular hand?
Yeah.
So it'll just be a single hand, basically a fist, kind of like Cliff's emulating right there, pulling out of the top of the vase. So build the heat back up in the punty. That will allow the bottom section to kind of fall back to center. The more even or centered an object is while we're working, the easier it is to maintain rotation and keep everything balanced where we want it to. The more off or out of center something is, the more challenging it is to keep the pipe turning. So Cliff's asked for a nice long flash. good soaking heat to make sure everything stays nice and warm. Come back out, get a measurement on the opening to make sure that the wrist of the hand will fit in there nice and appropriately. And then again, going back to the tag, lifting and pushing to pull the vessel back towards center. And we're looking more at the back section where it connects to the pipe to find our center. So Blake and Cliff are having a conversation, going through a little play-by-play to determine what's going to be the best approach. You know, there's always the opportunity. He's got some grabbers up on the bench that he's hoping he can grab the hand, grab it, break it, and stick it into it. But you also have to have some backup plans just in case. So they're talking about potentially grabbing it with a glove if it doesn't move the way they want it to, and eventually stick it into that opening that we're looking at. So Blake's going to get a small gather of glass on the end of the rod, do a little bit of cooling and shaping once he gets out of there, making sure that the tip is nice and hot, and then eventually he's going to come over to our little pickup oven that's sitting at 1,000 degrees and stick that bit of glass to the end of the hand. And then in short order, run over to a small reheating oven and start flashing it to make sure that it's staying nice and warm. So Blake could grab a little bit of heat. He's going to come over to our color box and stab the hand right on that back section. Push into it, make sure it's nice and stable. I'm going to get the camera a little bit further up so it doesn't go absolutely bonkers.
Don't like that.
There we go. Nice balance, well done. Holding that up so it collapses back a little bit because it is a pretty tenuous connection. Just kind of bouncing in and out of the heat to make sure everything is nice and warm. We'll get that balanced in an equalized heat throughout the entire piece. And then once that temperature gets all equalized, we will stick it back into the opening. Apologies for all the overheating cameras. So Blake's got the hand safely attached, or the fist of fury as it were. It's like Mike Tyson's punch out. So now these guys are going to work in pretty close concert with each other, communicating to make sure that temperature is right. So a little bit more communication, letting them know after the hand is stuck in that there's going to be a little bit more gold application to the base of the hand, basically where the wrist is. We're going to add a little bit more gold so it'll have a nice transition to the glass that is on the pipe. And that is just the tiniest little connection. So Cliff doing a quick measurement check, making sure he's got the diameter he needs. So when he does grab the hand and can stick it in, it's going to plunge into the vessel and it's not going to stick on the outside of it. So Cliff likes to heat the diameter. I'm going to get a little bit of a flash, making sure the temperature is nice and even. Cliff will get seated, get those grabbers ready to go. Blake's going to bring the hand over to him, basically fist facing Cliff. And you can see the amount of heat that Cliff has built up in the mouth of that vessel, which is critical because if he doesn't have that heat, when he goes to actually stuff it together, it's not going to work the way he wants. So he's got a Kevlar glove. He's going to go ahead and just grab this sucker. And then do his best to cram that sucker in there. There we go. Look at that. Nicely done. Not too often you just, grab 1,300 degrees of glass with a nice Kevlar mitt and just cram it into the vessel. Nicely done.
Did that feel as cool as it looks?
So now you can see we've got our hand attached into the vessel. That's the section right there where we're going to add additional gold once everything gets evened out with heat. You can also see where that clear kind of tongue is slowly going to wrap itself into the hand. Again, Blake coming in with the map gas, add a little bit of additional heat on the punty. So the hand kind of mushed in a little bit aggressive. So because we do have the hole at the bottom, once Cliff gets the hand fully sealed into it, he can actually take what's called a Sofiette, we also refer to it as a puffer, and actually add a little bit more air, and that's going to re-dome that top section out. What color is the hand?
Red.
The color of the hand is red, so massively deceptive right now. Is that kind of like fire engine red or the orange red? Okay, so it's more of a terracotta red with that nice jet black. Probably one of those mystery powders we got from Jim Bowman. Love you, Jim. One of those FAP colors. So there'll be a good amount of time of sculpting and shaping, making sure that that hand is fully sealed all the way around. And then you might want a straight one.
Yeah, well, I think if I have... Like, grab that one and hook it up to the compressed air. Let's get a little air on it.
So we've got an air compressor that we're actually going to attach to a little puffer. This will give us the opportunity to actually get the cone attached into the hole so we can actually add air to it. The other one, the cone was just a little too big. The Sofiette on this one's a little tighter, so it'll hit that diameter a little bit more evenly. So we'll do a little flash again, keeping everything nice and warm. And then we'll see if Cliff's new eyewear will allow him to see where he wants to stick this sucker. So making sure that that hole is warm. Adding a little bit of air pressure. And there we go. Blew it out. Nicely done.
Do that again. Okay. If you want, I can do that. You can watch and do it just like that again.
It sounds like we're going to try and do that one more round. kind of fill that out just a little bit more.
Yeah, that's straightened out. Put on the switch again real hard. See that little divot on the knuckle? Yeah. So we'll straighten it. We'll do that again.
So a little bit more hot torch. Keeping everything nice and warm, making sure we've got a good even seal all the way around. It's a really cool detail shot. The casting process that Cliff is using on this allows him to get some amazing detail, pulls out all the wrinkles in the skin, all the individual little creases. It started off with the idea of trying to use zircar, which is a mold making material. The unfortunate thing with the zircar is it left a bunch of fibers on the surface of the glass. So Cliff's been working pretty closely with a local foundry to develop a new, or develop for him something that works kind of on a foundry slurry approach that has the same principles as the zircar. So he's able to break that thing free and allow all that wonderful texture to stay really nice and true. So again, added that heat, pressure with the tagliol to compress the hand back into the object to make sure it's got a good tight seal to it. Yeah, talking about how they want to compress it back into the vessel a little bit before they add any additional air to kind of puff it up. Add a little bit more heat to it. So Blake's going to add a couple of more gathers of glass to the small punty rod. He's going to do a little bit of shaping basically into kind of a nice fat thumb, and then bring that over to Cliff, where you could see Cliff kind of moving the tweezers around the surface is where that bit is going to be applied. Move your butt, Nolan. Thank you. So again, creating a really nice compressed form with a little bit of a point. So that way when Cliff attaches it to the hand and the piece, it's a little bit tighter connection. We'll go up and down with that, give it a little bit of attachment, stretch it out, and then just kind of wind it around a little bit. That'll thin out a section, and then chomp it. And then we'll repeat that going the opposite direction, kind of even it out, give it a little bit more mass. Go for a slightly different approach. So again, kind of sculpting in with the tag, moving the glass around, making sure it's got a nice tight seal all the way around it. Nolan being mighty brave with the camera. And then Cliff will probably take another little flash here in a second. Little fluffy torch. Make sure everything's got a nice amount of heat to it. Really heating the punty. I'll take a little flash. Blake's getting that next little gather of glass. Getting a little bit more shaping and fine tuning. Blake's shaping up the cylinder. Gonna give it a little bit of a taper. So again, when Cliff comes over and sticks this, he can put it right where he wants it to go. There we go, got the shape we want. We're gonna stick that onto it. Stretch that around, kind of massage it through, and then allow it to connect to the top. And create that super duper fancy loop. Alrighty, so we'll swing back around to the other side, see what we've got working. Nice big long deep heat. Get everything nice and hot. Adding a pretty good amount of pressure and force to really pull the glass around where he wants it to go. Again, back with the hot torch, we're going to do a lot of isolating heat. That way, if Cliff needs to, he can come back in and really create some nice fine detail in those little sections without having any real distortion with the rest of it. Get a nice big flash. Cliff's going to go back to working on the outside of the bench so he can really define and manipulate the material where he wants it to go. Taking that tiny little sculpting tool and really pushing the glass around in very specific fashion. Really creating some fine lines. Just create a little bit extra detail with the way that the hand is kind of pulling out of the glass. So the process and what Cliff has been working on is ultimately an exploration in a larger scale piece that he's been working through Arts Fort Worth with the city. Eventually he's going to have a couple of nice installation pieces down here on Magnolia Avenue that's going to incorporate hands into the piece. So being able to develop all these individualized hands gives a greater opportunity to understand how they can work as a whole. Assistance as well as temperature, so they actually create what we want to create and not overheat ourselves, because it is mighty toasty in here this afternoon. It is very easy to just kind of get sucked in by this whole process and forget that I'm supposed to be trying to tell you what he's trying to do, so I apologize for that. Kind of like moth being drawn to a bright light. You just can't help but stare and look at it. And again, more fine detail. You can kind of see that point right in the middle of the frame that he pulled earlier. And then so now he's pulling out another one. Give a nice tight detail to it. I got too close and I scared him. No, is it going to happen? Wow. Nicely done, Gene. We now have the overheating phone handoff down to a science. Pretty remarkable. And you're going to put more gold over that section, Cliff?
I was going to put some gold in there, but that would have added another 20 minutes.
Okay.
Put some gold in his palm.
Got it. So it sounds like we may be bypassing adding gold to that new lava glass it added, but probably will add a little bit kind of in the fist of the hand and the palm section, just to kind of make it a little bit more cohesive to the glass that's on the vessel. That was super good. The type of glass we're using is a soft soda lime glass. That's one reason why we have the workability that we do with it. It's considered a long working glass. So we have anywhere from 15 to 20, maybe 25 seconds on the long end to really do something we want with it. That's one reason why Cliff can take that little bit that he's pinched and pulled and really stretch it out to a long, fine point. If this was a harder glass, trying to create that same process, he'd have much less time to do it, and may not even get it stretched out as far as he wants it to go. Here at Seneca, we work with 4 different types of glasses. In the hot shop, we're working with soft soda lime glass, manufactured by the awesome folks at Spruce Pine Batch Company. They've been making glass specifically for the art glass community for decades and decades and have an absolutely amazing product. In our flame working studio, we work with 2 different types of glasses. One is a very soft Italian glass called a Fetri. Soft meaning it has a long working time, but it's not very thermally stable. Has a tendency to get a little bit brittle and shocky if you don't warm things up really nice and slowly. The other glass we use in the flame working studio is a hard borosilicate glass, very similar to the Pyrex that we all have that we can cook with. It's very thermally stable, takes a lot of heat, so the hot torch that you've been seeing Cliff work and sculpt with this evening is the same type of torch you would use in that studio to actually manipulate the material, the borosilicate glass, to get it to move where you want it to go. And then, so those 2 glasses touched on the soft one, the borosilicate being a very stiff glass. Everything in this world has a measurable expansion and contraction rate, and the soft Italian glass we were discussing, that has an expansion and contraction rate of 104. The borosilicate glass, or the Pyrex, has an expansion and contraction rate between 30 and 33. The lower the number, the stiffer the glass, the more heat you have to really get it to move. So that 104 glass, exceedingly soft, moves super fluid. And then in our kiln forming studio, we use exclusively Bullseye Glass. It's an amazing material. It's kind of middle in terms of its stiffness. It has an expansion and contraction rate measured at 90. So a little bit stiffer than the material we're using in the hot shop, but still relatively malleable compared to the borosilicate glass in the flame working studio. Not only do those numbers indicate softness or malleability, but they also relate to how they can interact with each other. In most cases, if your numbers of expansion and contraction do not match, you can't use them together. So you always have to be careful with what you've got to work with. We're going for a multi-tool approach on this one. A little bit of a pokey, and then a little bit of a twist. Massage that up into the kind of the ball of the hand. And that's where the gold is actually going to get placed, I believe. Kind of looks like it's a pinched down bit of cloth almost. Again, stretching that out really far to create a nice fine termination. Cool tips on the connection, make it nice and brittle and allow it to break freely. And then back to the heat we go. Looks like Cliff's going to pull out another leaf of gold. Nice 23 karat leaf. So the gold is going to go there. Grabbing that gold, going to stick it right in there. Allow that to attach. Quick little flash again to keep everything nice and warm. Cliff's going to use his last bit of leaf in that same section just to double it up, make it a little bit more vibrant and bright. And once again, the camera decides to take a nap. So we'll get that gold pressed back into itself, and then we'll do another small layer of clear glass on top to encase it. And then we'll see where we're at. So that little ear that's been kind of sticking out there is actually going to loop over the gold that Cliff added to the fist to kind of cap it in there. And periodically you have to go back with that torch and make sure all those small little connections that are a little bit higher than the rest of the piece have a little bit of warmth on them so they don't get too brittle and actually break. Yeah.
Get all the humidity rolling in, but just
So again, adding a little bit of extra heat so you can pull that little tail into the hand. Also do a little bit of healing work. Got a little cool on that section, so there is a small crack, but you can just cook that right out with that nice hot torch. Slowly just pulling that material back into the middle of the fist where the gold is, covering that up. Again, putting a lot of heat into that little flared section, that little pulled out tail at the very edge of the hand. So when he's ready to really make the big move, it's going to move exactly where he wants. Always coming back in towards the punty, the bottom of the piece, and trying to make sure that that stays nice and warm so you don't end up with things getting too brittle and too cold and breaking. sounds like after this heat, Cliff's actually going to work from the outside of the bench so he can get a really good line of sight. Pull it, stretch it, flip it, and then you're just going to slowly, I believe, probably massage it. Oh, curl it in. Then add that pressure. Adding a lot of force, really pulling the material down into itself, getting it to move exactly where he wants it to go. Give a flash. Pull down our light meter so it looks really dark. And it's time to change phones once again. Get another isolating heat. Get that thinned out. Created that little loop so you can actually use it as a handle to stretch it down where he wants it to go without having to make sure it's got really precise contact. So the goal at this point is trying to get the bottom kind of realigned to the punty so it's relatively flat. And then go back to the top of the hand and readdress it. Make sure that all the little connections and pulls are kind of lined up the way Cliff wants them to go. So pretty much anything can be a tool. You know, not only is that torch allowing to put heat where we want it to go, but because the bell of it's really nice and hot, you can use it to manipulate the hand around as well. That's a really cool imagery as the flame's kind of moving all over it. So a little bit more fine tuning, really focusing the heat on the, again, the smaller thinned out section to make sure that they don't have any unneeded stress in them. Coming back to that one little point probably means that he's going to thin that out, make it a little bit more delicate, a little bit tighter finish. Probably go for another flash. Now coming in with that paddle, gave it a little bit of warmth so it wouldn't be too cold touching that back section, adding pressure and rotation to try and even that bottom section up as best as possible. So that way it's got a nice flat point to sit on. We're not going to have one section that's pulled over heavier than another. right, so it sounds like Cliff ultimately likes the way everything is looking. Do a few more flashes, make sure again all the heat is equally distributed. You don't want to have one part that's over hot compared to another section. Because when you grab it, make it actually sag into the gloves, kind of distort the form. So we may take a few flashes on this just to make sure that heat's nicely evenly distributed. So while Cliff's working on evening the heat, Blake is going to gear up, basically put on a bunch of Kevlar so he can grab the piece comfortably. And then that is going to go into one of our annealers. An annealer is a nice slow cooling oven that allows our glass to come down to a nice room temperature. We run a fairly conservative program. We run about a 16-hour cycle to bring it down to room temperature. If we bypass that step, especially with something like this where you have a lot of thin and thick sections, those thicker sections will hold heat longer, the thinner sections will cool off more quickly and can actually break pretty severely. So by adding the annealing to it, it allows the glass to cool, like I said, more evenly throughout, eliminating as much stress as we physically can get out of it before we can look at it. So keep in mind, the base of this is a nice, bright, shiny black. The hand itself is going to be a kind of terracotta red. There we go, we popped it off. I'm gonna add a little bit of a fire polish right on that punty, so that way we have a nice smooth bottom. And then once that is nice and smooth, that's gonna go to our cooling oven. We're loading in our bottom oven today, sitting at a whole temperature of about 920 degrees Fahrenheit. And then that'll go right in there. And there we go. Nicely done. Bravo. Yay! Nice job, y'all.
Absolutely.
Yay! So cool. We're going to take a little bit of a break at least, cool down a little bit. Probably get with Cliff here in a moment and have a little conversation. Sure. So we'll be back with you guys shortly.
We're a nonprofit dedicated to education, dedicated to community, and we use glass art and the creative process to help people to heal and to become interested in the visual arts, to become interested in science. A lot of our programming is focused around STEM concepts, STEAM concepts really, to include the arts. And we are a public access studio here for everyone. Seneca Studios was founded in 2010. We started offering program in early 2011, and we have over 30,000 people come and participate. The brand really illustrates community and bringing together the primary elements in community. We offer glass blowing opportunities, we offer flame working classes and workshops, and we also offer kiln forming classes. We've done programming for domestic abuse survivors, we've done programming for homeless kids and people who are looking to heal. We've used our process to help people to express themselves. One of our probably more powerful stories is about a young woman named Alexis who came in and she had never worked with glass, and we did a kiln forming project, and she and her brother and several other students cast their ideas into thick pieces of glass, and she made a heart that helped her to express the loss of her father. Had a pacemaker. It was a real interesting piece, and it ended up going at auction to someone who had also lost their father, and it was a really powerful moment for all of us. She was struggling to express herself, and we helped her to find her voice and to make something that she could not only see how it could help her tell her story, but also to connect in the community and help someone else kind of heal through glass art. As Seneca Studio presents to foundations and to donors, and receive support. Oftentimes the support is specific to a project where we're bringing in kids that are connected with those foundations or with those donors, and that money goes specifically to offering this opportunity to people who wouldn't have it otherwise. The organization has a sustainability model where we generate revenue in many ways, and that revenue is what covers our overhead and keeps the organization going. The support oftentimes is specific to a program, so that 100% of people's donations go towards offering programming to people. Our outreach and our culture of outreach really drives us to find funding outside of that so we can bring the community in and offer programs specifically to our community. Thank you. We are a determined group, and I pledge that any support offered will be used in endeavors in the spirit of community, with kindness and generosity, and with fearlessness.
You're like, here, you take it. No, you take it. I'm just gonna hand it to the.
Can't wait for that race bed to be out. Irritated. I want one. It seems like a good idea at first.
This is on. But it's not feeding, is it? It is? So everyone, welcome back. We're gonna take a few moments just to chat with Clifton in the gallery about his work, what he's been up to over the past few years, actually. A couple of years he's been working on this public art piece. So Clifton.
Hi, Jean. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in to Seneca Studios Open Studios night. It's a real treat to be featured. You know, I'm usually on the other side of these demonstrations.
Yeah.
So I'm really grateful to Seneca Studios and all their supporters for today and for being highlighted. I was selected several years ago by the city for their public art program to put some public pieces in our community. I was somewhat strategic about my approach to working towards that and put myself in a position to be eligible for the project that is on our street in our neighborhood. And I was very fortunate to be selected for they select about 5 artists and then they have interviews and then they bring that down to 3 artists for proposals and then they select one, and I was I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to make public art. It's really an artist's kind of dream to have their work seen, right? And so if we make things and we sell them in galleries and they go to people's homes, the audience is relatively small. Maybe 100 people will see it at dinner parties, and so to have something that is a part of a city's collection that 100 people might see in a weekend is quite a task, and it's quite an honor to have that opportunity. So I'm really grateful to Arts Fort Worth, the City of Fort Worth, and their public arts program. I want to thank Martha Peters for her support and Karen Wiley and everybody at Public Art for all that they do for this community and certainly for this opportunity. So my work and my thoughts in glass all come back to Seneca Studios, right? And so as the executive director, I try to work with this incredible team to promote glass making and to bring people in to experience it in lots of ways. And so it's very much about community. When we first defined Seneca, it was about bringing together of silica, sodium, and calcium, and that's where the name came from. It's elemental. And the combination of these elements and then filled with our dedication and our passion in these incredible outcomes, you know, they become quite beautiful and meaningful. So I'm a softie, and I like nature, and I like I'm inspired by our, natural setting. And so as a child, I sat under a magnolia tree at every house we ever lived in and picked up these strange and alien-looking magnolia seed pods. There was a pine tree in our yard, and I was always fascinated as I climbed up and fell out and landed on pine cones and then the mighty oak. And so these seeds are a great reminder from nature about seasonal shifts and the environmental triggers that inspire growth. And so as I was thinking about a project and thinking about the near South Side and Fort Worth and all that we've accomplished as an organization, that really is what drives my narrative or my expression behind this project. And so ultimately I'm going to be making 3 sculptures that will live on Magnolia Avenue: a pine cone, a magnolia seed pod, and an acorn. And so this was the maquette, the first of the acorns that I made. And so it's composed of my daughter's hand. It's made in copper and then obviously glass, because I'm a glass maker. The ultimate symbol of humanity is the hand. For hundreds and hundreds, really thousands and thousands of years, as human beings, we've made and we've grown and we've evolved and we've been triggered by environment and we've built and created with our hands. And so without them, we would not be here. As young people in tribal communities, there was a rite of passage to put your hand in with the rest of the community, to dip it into some mud and to slap it on a wall and to, proclaim yourself an element of your community and competent enough to do anything that was necessary. And so I used the hand as a metaphor and as a brushstroke, so to speak, to compose these things. And so each of these will be a reflection of our community of makers. We live in a really cool, and we're in the near South Side, which is historically somewhat industrial community. There was factories, and this was really a community of makers and doers that slowly built an incredible community, and still today, and it's been through its ups and downs, just like the seasonal shifts. There's times when it's hard, and there's times when it's cold, and there's times when we have to put our head down and keep going, as we've all experienced over the last few years. And so I used the hand to help bring the community together as we all cultivate a better tomorrow, or a new season. So it's entitled The Seeds of a New Season. It's composed of people in our community. I'm casting hands of our team, of our friends, of our even strangers. And I have about 45 hands right now, and I'm composing a very large acorn. And then I will turn to the magnolia seed pod once the acorn is off to the foundry. I'm working with a great foundry. They've helped me to really understand some things. These are all copper, but ultimately they will be made from bronze, and they will be illuminated from within. So there's going to be some technological component to it as well. But it's really a fascinating process, public art. It's super challenging, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity, and I look forward to, over the next 8, 10, 12 months perhaps, to get these completed and put into our community on Magnolia Avenue. So when you come down to perhaps this fall's event, or perhaps next spring, the Seeds of a New Season will be on the sidewalk here in the near South Side. So
wonderful. Thanks, Clifton.
Yeah, thank
well,
you
I just
guys.
want to, on behalf of Seneca, say congratulations again, and we are so proud of you.
Thank you.
One of the things that we are about is community, but we're also about our artists doing what they do best. So it's been kind of amazing to see you flourish as an artist, take on this awesome project, and like really, 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 I mean, these are just incredible. So it's been really awesome to watch
Thanks,
you work
Jeannie.
with these.
Yeah. So we're going to do another quick demo. I've been experimenting with textures and making vases with some interesting ideas, kind of stroked across them, thinking about how the glass and the metal come together. I'm using gold in these instances. And so I have one more small blown bubble that was in that we did earlier in the demo.
Right.
That's still warm, and so I'm going to pick up some more glass and make a small bubble, and then sculpt another little version of what we just did.
Okay.
Try to expedite it a little bit, and make another one of these things that ultimately is a study towards this project. Because when I composed the future larger pieces for the community, they're gonna have glass hands in them as well. There's bronze hands in some, glass hands in some, and both in some. So they'll all kind of tie together and hopefully inspire a little discovery, and people will want to see one and see the next one and move around in our community. So
Right, amazing.
let's go make some more things.
Awesome. We'll follow you in there. You guys don't forget, if you have any questions while you're watching tonight, feel free to pop those questions in the chat. I'm going to take over from here to give Kevin a little bit of a break. But we are monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions about Clifton, what he's making, his work, I can pass those on to him. But if you also have any questions about Seneca Studios, feel free to put those in the chat too. A lot of information is available on our website, senecastudios.org. So feel free to check that out. We put a link into the chat earlier about that. But yeah, we got just about an hour or so, as you saw, or you heard Clifton talk about earlier. He's planning on making something a little bit similar to what we just put away, but it is going to be different. So if you didn't get a chance to watch the last demo, feel free to hang out, watch, and let us know if you have any questions about anything you see tonight. So while we're waiting for the team to kind of put their plan together and talk about it, I'm just going to briefly show you around our studio, or at least our hot shop. If you come to take a class, this is the first thing you're probably going to see us use is the furnace. This is the heart of the studio, the hot shop. We keep the glass in this furnace at about 2100 degrees, pretty much year round. In the summer, we shut it down. So if you heard Kevin talking about it earlier, we shut this furnace down in the summer. One, because it's too hot to blow glass, but it also gives us an opportunity to maintain the studio, fix parts of the studio. So we send this down to room temperature real slow, and that allows us to make any needed repairs on it. So other than the summer, this unit sits at about 2100 degrees pretty much year round. Now in the summer we make a big show of this shutting down of the furnace, and we ladle out everything. So if you've heard about our ice cream social, this is the event that we use to promote the shutting down of the furnace, the raising of funds for repairs we do over the summer. It's a really amazing event where you can come grab some ice cream, you can purchase a handmade bowl to eat your ice cream in, and then you can also make a sand casting. So there's a bunch of different opportunities at the Ice Cream Social to participate with us, help us raise funds, and just kind of cool off, you know. So while we're cooling off the furnace, you get to cool off too with some ice cream. So stay tuned for that. We will have that up on our website fairly soon, where you can start kind of purchasing packages and sand castings for that event. So in this part of the studio, you'll see a couple of units that sit kind of hot. They look kind of like furnaces, but they're not quite furnaces. There's no glass in there intentionally. These are basically reheating chambers. So as the glass is cooling down, we gotta reheat it somewhere. So we use these units to heat things back up. You'll see in the middle of those two units is what we call a pipe warmer. And that's just a place to set the pipes to keep the ends hot. Now, glass doesn't stick to cold metal, but it will stick to warm metal. So this is a spot for us to keep our pipes and punties, just to warm everything up so that the glass sticks a little bit better. You'll see the wide array of molds we have under there. If you're coming by to make something like an ornament or a pumpkin, if you have come by to make an ornament or a pumpkin, you probably used one of those molds. And if you haven't, then you may want to think about coming and checking it out, making an ornament of your own this year, so you can see how we use those optic molds. So Clifton and Blake are getting us started with a little bit of prep today. Don't forget, if you're local, you can come hang out with us. We're on Magnolia Avenue, and we're hanging out for about an hour to finish up this piece. Clifton's gonna pick up a little bit of color on the end of that pipe there. So glass is kind of finicky. It doesn't like to be heated too quickly, and it doesn't like to be cooled too quickly. Slow cooling and slow heating is definitely important for this material. And so you can see that Clifton had that color that he picked up in a small little oven called a color pickup box, or a kiln. We can't pick up that color in that quantity. It's basically a big old chunk of color. We can't pick it up at room temperature. It would basically explode. So we've got to heat it up to about 1,000 degrees or so, and then we can pick it up and continue to work with it. So most of the time when you're coming in to take a class with us, most of the time you're not going to be using a chunk of color like this. color comes in crushed up grades. And so if you come in, you're gonna see that we have color in basically what we call frit, which is basically like a ground up color. This is a very fine grade of frit. Looks like a powder. But frit comes in different grades. I think 4 or 5 different grades. And if you come take a class with us, you'll get to use crushed up color. That's basically one of the larger sizes. So Blake is prepping some color for Clifton. What color is that, Blake?
It's gold brown.
Gold brown.
Really reducing, dark production.
Yeah. So gold brown is a really cool color. It sounds like it's going to be kind of boring. Like browns don't tend to be super gorgeous colors necessarily, but the gold brown is like super beautiful. So gold brown has this quality to it where you hit it with the flame and then all the metal in the glass kind of comes up to the surface. And that's where it gets that gold from. Some of the gold in the color comes up to the surface, the gold and it gives it kind of a goldish appearance. There's not actually gold in the color, but some of the metallic qualities come out. It's quite a beautiful color. And actually, even as a brown, without that gold quality, it's a very rich, chocolatey, beautiful brown shade. So Clifton's got this color out. What are you planning on using it for?
Use it for the bits.
For the bits? Okay, got it. So if you've been hanging out on the live stream for a little while, you saw the process that Clifton went through for the last piece. This one's going to be kind of similar. He's starting out with the color for the base, and that color is black that's on there, Clifton. So he's got a black color as a base. We're going to gather some clear glass over it to give it volume and size. And then once the piece is like being put, once its final touches are being put on, Clifton's going to add some of that gold brown and then reduce it, which is basically the process I talked about, where we're bringing the metal to the surface just by hitting it with a torch. So the glassmaker's tools are kind of awesome, right? There's so many of them because we can't quite put our hands right on the glass. I mean, I guess you could if you...
Sunset.
It is beautiful.
Good. This time of year, that's
So Clifton's been using the newspaper for the most part, which is really a great tool because you can just kind of wet the newspaper and it'll act as a shield between your hand and the glass. So you can put your hands pretty close to the glass while you're shaping it. All right. So Clifton's got to let that glass chill out like he did before gathering in the furnace again. Temperature is super important, as you guys have probably noticed by watching our live stream. For a glassmaker, temperature is like one of the most important things. So making sure that color is not too hot will ensure that no color ends up back in our clear glass. Clifton's using what we call a wooden block. And it's shaped kind of like a cup shape, like a stemless wine or a Q-tip shape. One of the best starting forms for most things that we work with and make is this like kind of a Q-tip shape. So the blocks are really nice to get into that shape very fast. One other thing you're going to notice about the glass at this point is the color. It's like bright orange, which is not really what the glass is going to be once it's cooled down to room temperature. That bright orange is basically the heat that's emanating from the glass. Remember we talked about 2100 degrees? So at this point, how hot would you say that glass is right now? Maybe like 17, 18?
The surface isn't that hot now because of all the cooling.
Right.
Maybe down in there.
Yeah, maybe in the core, it's
Yeah.
around 17 or so.
Probably not. I think because I didn't take a reading, the surface was cold. It's colder. The core was already a little cold, so
Yeah.
it took a little air, so it probably got to 14.
Yeah, so it's still at its moving stage, which is maybe like around 1400 or so in the interior. Because Clifton's been shaping the exterior of the glass with water and that newspaper, it's gonna chill out a little more than the color that you're seeing. So that color that's in the center is supposed to be black, and it will be black once the glass is cooled down. But what you're seeing right now is the radiant heat kind of bouncing off of that. Another thing you'll notice is that layer of clear on the outside. It's not quite clear. It's got a little tiny tint of yellow. Ooh, you trapped some bubbles in there.
That's actually gold.
Oh, is
That's
it?
what- yeah.
A little bit of gold was on the paper, and I
Oh,
stuck
got
it.
it.
A little bit of gold.
Beautiful.
All right. Get another gather on that.
So in order to make a piece bigger, you've got to add more clear. We can only blow a bubble up so far with a certain amount of glass material, right? So think about it kind of like a balloon. There's only so far that a balloon can stretch. And if you want to blow a really big balloon, that balloon material, the rubber, has to be really thick. And so in a very similar way, the glass has got to be, we've got to have a few gathers of glass to get the piece to be bigger. So you can really see now that the color is changed back. It was looking like it was kind of cooling off a little bit, going a little darker. And as soon as Clifton gathered up more glass on top, you can see that bright red orange color is back. So for the first part of this process, you're going to notice that. You're going to notice that the color of the glass is going to have that orange glow to it. And about the second half, you'll notice that the true color, the black color of the glass, kind of comes out a little more. So Clifton's using what we call a Marver, M-A-R-V-E-R. It's basically a stainless steel table, and it's used to shape the glass as well as chill the glass out. So you guys know that steel feels really nice and cool to the touch. Everywhere that Clifton touches that steel table, the glass is kind of chilling out. So when he blows into that bubble, it's going to blow out where the glass is warm versus where the glass is cool. You'll notice that Clifton's got a blow hose on at this point. That's going to allow him to inflate that bubble as he's working. Alternatively, some glassblowers will use a partner. So you can see that that wet newspaper provides a little bit of protection between Clifton's hand and the glass, but it also lets him shape the glass up really well. Because the glass can kind of conform to the shape of his hand, he has full control over that shape that it becomes. And as he's shaping, it's kind of hard to tell, but as he's shaping up the glass, he's also slowly inflating it. So gravity is a friend, but also a foe with glassmaking. You can see that Clifton's constantly turning as he's working with the glass. If he were to stop turning, we would get something that's a little bit lopsided. The glass is going to kind of seek out the floor. And so Clifton's going for something that is symmetrical in nature, which means that he's got to keep his left hand constantly kind of turning as he's using the tools. This takes quite a bit of getting used to, so if you guys come take a class with us, the instructor is going to help you out with this part. It takes at least a year of working with hot glass to get comfortable with that part. So Clifton is using a tool called a jax, and he's basically putting in a constriction. This constriction is going to allow us to break the glass free from the blowpipe. Once we're ready for it, of course. And then every time Clifton works with the tools, works at the bench for too long, he's got to go back into that reheating chamber. If we allow the glass to cool down too fast, it's going to crack on us. And cold glass doesn't quite move, like at all, right? So we've got to keep it nice and warm so it stays in its gooey stage. So hopefully you can tell on the camera that this bubble is getting a little bit bigger as Clifton is blowing into the pipe. Glassmaking is totally a team sport. So you can see that Blake has taken over from here. Clifton is communicating to Blake about what he needs. I believe he's planning on squishing it, and that's the official term. Squishing, right? Squishing is the squishing or squashing. So Clifton's got a couple of cork paddles in his hands. You'll see he's like kind of moving them in little circles so that we don't get the cork sticking to the glass. Beautiful. So I mentioned earlier that gravity is your friend. It can be your foe, for sure. But in this case, when a glassmaker understands what the material is doing and they have a little bit of experience, most often gravity is your friend. So you're going to see a lot of glassmakers use gravity by tilting the pipe up, tilting the pipe down, using gravity to help shape the glass. And then Clifton is using what we call a hot torch to spot heat in area that he wants to get a little bit hotter than the rest of the glass. Blake's got a wooden paddle in his hands. And he's helping Clifton by putting in a flat spot. So most of the time when we're making vessels in this studio, the flat spot ends up being the bottom of the vessel. It's kind of counterintuitive, right? Seems like you would have the bottom closer to you, but with glassmaking it's a little bit the opposite. We start from the bottom and then we shape the top of the vessel later. So I'm not 100% sure if Clifton's making this a vessel form.
Do the same thing as last time.
Got it. So you're gonna poke a hole in this area. Clifton's using a tungsten rod and getting it at the right heat to poke a little hole in. So glass needs to have, ideally not a closed form. So if the team is working on this piece and it's basically a closed off bubble, then every time they heat it, the air inside is going to expand. And every time they cool it, the air inside is going to contract. And they're going to be fighting that throughout the process. So it's very rare for us to close off something, and most often if we close off a bubble, that's going to happen right before the piece gets put away. So Clifton is putting that hole in basically to make sure that as he continues to work on the piece, the bubble's not going to expand and contract on him. All right. The next part of the process is going to be the transfer. So Blake is gathering out of the furnace on what we call a punty. So punty is a little bit of glass used to make a transfer from one pipe to the other. So using the Marver, he's pushing most of that glass back, making the back nice and clean, and then shaping up the tip of the punty. Now the part that we talked about being the bottom of the vessel, we're going to stick this punty to that. Once Blake's got the right heat, and Clifton is sure that the heat is right, blowing on it a little bit will help with that part. That punty gets stuck to the bottom, and then we're going to be able to transfer the piece. So Clifton is going to put a little bit of water right on that jack line that we created earlier, and then with a little bit of a tap, a little vibration, those pieces come apart from the blowpipe. So if you've been at our studio or you've been at a glass studio, you've seen this process probably a bunch of times, most often when they're making some sort of vessel form. But it's used a lot in sculpture as well. If you're ever shaping the bottom of a piece separate from the top of a piece, this process is used quite a bit. And punties always look kind of different. So the punty that we're using is pretty standard at this point, but depending on what you're doing, that punty can look totally different. All right. So what's going on next?
Pick up the hand.
Okay.
We're going to stick the hand and then add the bits.
Okay, got it. All right. So the next part of this process is changing up this form, right? Clifton's forming something that looks like a pretty standard vessel form. And then Blake's gonna assist by helping to pick up some of the more interesting parts that Clifton is gonna assemble. So grabbing a little bit of glass from the furnace. Man, that is bright. That white pot is about just I think over 2100 degrees. Maybe under. But right around 2100. Once again, shaping it up. And then the next part of this process and if you've been watching for the entire live stream, you saw Clifton put this piece away earlier. So Blake's got these hands that Clifton blew into earlier. And if you missed that part of the live stream, once we're done live streaming tonight, you should be able to go back and watch the beginning when Clifton blew into the mold. Those are so cool. So Clifton's got this form. Blake is making sure that the heat is correct by just heating alongside of Clifton. Now temperature is super important for glass makers. If the hands were too cold, they would immediately crack upon sudden heat application. And if they get too hot, they're going to lose all of that beautiful detail that Clifton spent a long time trying to get from that mold. Beautiful. So here's where that closed off bubble thing comes in. So Clifton's kind of put these forms in the opening of the vessel. And so as he closes off that form, he's creating basically a closed vessel, right? So every time he heats that glass up, we're gonna see the glass the air inside kind of expand, and if you cooled it down, you would see the air kind of contract. And so that hole that he put in the bottom is really gonna minimize that.
So yeah, go around. We'll start here and work our way out towards that tip. We can probably stop there.
So we're gonna add a little bit of color to this. Blake is gathering up a little bit of glass from the furnace. He's gonna roll it in that color you saw us pull out earlier, that gold brown color. And it's gonna look kind of, it's gonna still kind of look orange or yellow or white to us. But once the piece is cooled down, we'll be able to see a little bit of that brown color come out. If you've been paying attention though, it's not gonna quite look it's not going to quite look like a brown. It's going to look kind of goldish. It's going to have like a metallic sheen to it, just because the color is going on the surface. So a little bit of a glitch there in our process. Blake noticed that there was something weird stuck to the glass. So like a great assistant, he checked with Clifton and then corrected that bit before bringing it over to Clifton. So Blake's doing a little more shaping, giving it another heat. And then the bit is brought over once the heat is correct. Super gooey. So at this stage, it's not quite like honey. It's more like a taffy. Got more of a taffy quality to it. Clifton's going to take a few of these decorative bits. And then he's going to shape them up. This tool is called a tag. Basically, it's like a flat paddle, metal paddle, and it makes these really beautiful sharp lines in the glass. A lot of sculptors will also use the flat side to shape things. Almost every tool in this studio gets repurposed at some point for some sort of other thing than it was intended for. So sculptors are really, really creative and look at kind of every shape of the tool as an opportunity for sculpting with. So Clifton is hot torching this bit just to give it a little more of a specific heat so that the glass actually moves when he touches it. Blake's heating up another bit, just like the one before, heating up the glass, adding color, shaping it, and then giving it a proper, nice, juicy heat.
Kept the furnace heat on this one. I lost it in my last one.
So you guys, if you've been watching our live stream tonight or you've just tuned in, don't forget that you can do this too. Not this in its specificity, but you can come work with glass. We offer classes, we offer tons of classes. So if you think you may want to make a pumpkin this season, you want to make an ornament this season, that's such a nice activity to do by yourself, but also with the family or with friends. So think about it. If you've never done this before, I have a feeling this is probably on your bucket list. And if you're near Fort Worth or you're in the DFW area, don't forget to check us out online and sign up early because our classes fill up really fast. We've got this amazing hot shop where you can take classes if you'd like. But we've also got a couple of other studios. We've got 3 other studios in our building. So if you've got some like extra bottles at home that you want to cut up, maybe the cold working 101 class is for you. Or if you say you're not like really a fan of the heat and you want to just hang out with some friends and cut up some glass and play with some glass, maybe the kiln forming studio might be the right one for you. And if you really, really like fire, but you don't want to be in the hot shop, then maybe the flame working studio is the right one for you. And if none of that sounds good and you're just like, I really just want to buy some glass, well, we offer that too. So come check out the gallery if you're more of a buyer than a maker. So I don't know if you guys can see that on camera, but some of those metallic tones are kind of coming out of the glass. We talked a little bit about that the gold brown color. That means the reheating chamber is slightly reducing. So reduction is the process by which the glass is usually hit with the flame, and some of the metal comes to the surface and causes that like mirror-like finish. And so we're seeing some of that on the glass right now, which is pretty cool. So remember, you guys, the color is going to be totally different. And if you're kind of curious to see this piece in person and see what it really, really looks like, you're going to have to visit us at a later date to come check it out. So Clifton is going to put some final touches on this piece. Are you going to add any more bits? No? Okay. Okay. So he's going to put some final touches on these bits, sculpting them into little flames. In the meantime, I'm going to show you guys real fast some of the pieces that he's been working on here. So Clifton's got these really great examples. This one's the mold material that he's been using to make these hands. So this is basically a similar shell to what you would cast bronze in, and he's using them to blow glass into. So this right here is a glass. This is the wax form that the glass mold is painted onto. And this is basically a plaster model. So Clifton is working, like we've been talking about, he's working on this very large scale public art project. This is actually, I think, a 2-scale, I could be mistaken, but I believe this is a 2-scale 3D print. And those two are going to get attached together. So it's going to be pretty large once it's complete. So definitely come check out his work in the gallery, but also if you see him around, come chat with him about the project he's been working on. It's been a couple years in the making, and I know he's super excited about it, and we are too. And so if you stop in and you see Clifton, ask him how his project's working, and I'm sure he'd be happy to tell you about it. All right. That gold brown.
Yeah.
It is. It is. It's got some beautiful like purple and gold tones in it. So I'm going to switch my camera real fast so I can catch the end of this. So I'm going to set you guys down for just a second on this Marver. All right, cool. All right. Perfect. So this part of the process is going to be a little repetitive. Clifton is heating up the bits and kind of shaping them and just doing some fine tuning overall. the detail work is really the most important part about this whole process, right? Because when you look at a piece overall, you see its overall shape, but it gains a new appreciation for it when you're able to look at the tiny, tiny little details and all of the time that the artist spent kind of finessing all the tiny little parts of it. So at this point, the glass is still pretty warm, but you can see some of the final colors starting to come out. Blake and Clifton are both trying their best not to get the glass too hot. It shouldn't move at this point. It's got to kind of stay on the cooler side of things. And so they've got to maintain that balance. But at this point, you can probably see some of the color, the final color kind of coming out. Those silver tones, the black base color. And while Clifton is concentrating on the piece, Blake is being a great assistant. And he's watching that connection between the pipe and the piece. So the punty, if that little bit of glass gets too cold and the piece could crack at that joint. So Blake's being very observant, watching that connection point, and every so often he's using a little map gas torch just to kind of give it a little bit of extra heat. The longer that Clifton is spending doing detail work, the longer the back side of the piece is cooling off. So this is an excellent assistant right here, Mr. Blake Bowles, doing a really good job keeping an eye on things. So you guys, we are slowly nearing the ending of our programming tonight. So I'll take this opportunity to kind of tell you that we do this every second Friday of the month. So we do a live stream as well as an in-person event. And there's nothing quite like watching this in person. So while we have been offering this as a live stream, I do encourage you to come hang out with the artists in person because you get to talk with them about their process. You get to see these things up close. And you can ask them questions while they work. The live stream is pretty awesome, but it's not really a great replacement for the real thing, for sure. And don't forget, if you don't want to take one of our classes, we've got tons of events where you can participate. I mean, let's be real though, you want to take one of our classes, I think you do. So come take one of our classes, but if you're looking for other ways to participate, there's a lot of other ways you can support us. One is by just donating. So if you have the financial means to help our programming out, we do tons of outreach programming as a nonprofit for people, for tons of different people, from very, very young to much older folks. We So that's a nice way to help us out. If you can't volunteer or if you can't donate your cash, you can also volunteer your time. We have tons of events, and we're always looking for volunteers to help us out at those events. Also, just come hang out with us. We really like seeing your faces here. So come hang out with us during these open studio nights. You can come hang out and grab a bowl of ice cream during our ice cream social. You can grab a beer with us during our Pride Us Outside event. You can come grab some glass during the Tremota if you want to purchase something. So think about it. We've got tons of ways for you to participate if you've never been here before. Really, our goal is to have something for everyone, because glass is for everyone. So once again, I just want to, if you missed the beginning and the middle of this live stream, don't forget to go back and check it out. We did a little interview with Clifton in the gallery, so if you want to know more about his work, go ahead and rewind once we've gotten off this live stream. It'll be archived in our videos on YouTube as well as Facebook, so you can go back and watch those parts. If you want to see how he made those glass hands, those were at the very beginning of the live stream. So that's where you'll want to check. If you want to hear about his work, we're about like maybe halfway to 2/3 of the way through this live stream. And then I just want to say again, Clifton, congratulations on your public art project. We're super proud of you that you took this step in your artistic career. And those of you who aren't familiar with Clifton Crawford, you should know him because he's one of the main reasons that Seneca exists. So Clifton Crawford, Kevin McGee, who was narrating earlier, are both part of the 5 founders who helped make Seneca possible. They're still both very active. Clifton is the executive director, and Kevin helps maintain our studios. He's the associate director at Seneca Studios. All right. So Clifton's put kind of the final touches on his piece and has given Blake the go-ahead to start getting suited up. So you'll see that Blake has got on, at this point, probably the most protective gear than you've seen him wear since the beginning of the demonstration. So at the end of every piece, the glass is knocked off into a set of gloves, and then it gets put away for very slow cooling, called annealing. So Blake's ready to kind of catch the piece once it comes off this punty. We're going to see Clifton use a little bit of water on his tweezers. He's going to give it a cold spot. Remember, glass doesn't like very quick cooling and it doesn't like very quick heating. So quick cool allows it to break off where we want it to break. Clifton's hitting the bottom with a torch to polish the bottom out. And then the piece is going to go into an annealing oven where it will sit at around 900 degrees and slowly come down to room temperature overnight. Nice job!
Super interesting. That one went together better, quicker.
Yeah.
5 minutes after.
Nice job, Clifton.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Blake.
Good work, team.
Gene, high five.
Go team.
Team.
Thank you, Gene.
Thank you, Gene. Can't say enough about the team. As so often you hear in glassmaking community, the teamwork makes the dream work. This organization is really fortunate to have such an amazing team, and honestly, it's an honor to be a part of it. We need some help, though. You know, there's challenges left and right. We are doing our best to grow and to plan and to be strategic and to be smart and be good stewards of people's donations. So if you admire Seneca, if you like what you see, please make a donation and help us to move forward. There's lots of ways you can be involved, but that's one we really need some help. I want to recognize the Arts Fort Worth, the Texas Commission on the Arts, the Ann L. and Carol Green Rhodes Charitable Trust, the R4 Foundation, J.E.S. Edwards Foundation. We have some great partners and some incredible people who are helping us move forward. But we, like I said, the teamwork makes the dream work. So we need more help. We need more support. Thank you, Gene, for all that you've done tonight and always to enhance Seneca Studios. Thank you, Heidi, for your work on the back end to help make it all work. Yes. Thanks to Blake Bowles for his assistance tonight. Thank you so much, Blake, and Nolan Bishop and Kevin McGeehee, the muscle around here. Everybody around here is so passionate, and we're super grateful for everybody's involvement. So thank you for this evening. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Have a great Saturday.
Thanks, Clifton.
Thank you, Gene.